Is Jesus Christ just a remix of Mithras, Dionysus, or Osiris? Or is that comparison missing something deeper? Same themes, divine birth, death, resurrection, but are we looking at a copying, convergence, or something actually that broke the pattern? And if the early church saw parallels too, why didn't it weaken their message? Why did it sharpen it? Well, that's some things we're going to talk about. So, I don't know, keep it right here or something. You're listening to Mount Hermeneutics, where three Marines give their perspective on God, faith, and spirituality with a heavy lean on the divine council worldview. This is not your grandma's Sunday school, nor is it always for the Christian faint of heart. Nothing about who we are or what we say make us experts. But you better believe we'll have a take, and perhaps it won't suck.
But in fairness, you use words that literally no other human uses.
It's not true.
You use King James words.
No, I never do that.
Uh,
It's like at church, man. Girls are always saying they want a godly man, but then you tell them the original Greek of their favorite proof passage, and they're not into you anymore.
That's so good. Remember that Mount Hermeneutics, that's the name of our show, right? Mount Hermeneutics.
Yeah, it
This
is.
it's free and available on all podcast platforms, including YouTube. If you're seeing our cheerful, joyous faces, then you're on YouTube. And if you are on YouTube, go ahead and hit the that little like button and then the little notification bell, and you may as well subscribe. It doesn't cost anything, so just subscribe,
Sure.
right? And you know this is maybe a topic that you're gonna like, and maybe you're gonna think we're dead wrong, and maybe you should participate and tell us how wrong we are, even though you'll be wrong about telling us we're wrong. Anyway, if it's your first time with us, I'm Andre. That's Matt. That's Brian. Fellas, what's happening?
Hey,
I,
guys.
I'm concerned that you might be having a stroke. You okay?
Yeah, yeah, I'm okay. Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
it would be the first time, so it's
No, that's why I ask.
anyway, yeah. Little tongue tied, a little
Right.
tongue
Hey,
tied.
it happens.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a professional. I mean, we could have cut it. I could have done it
Nah,
again, but then yeah, we can't do it. Just leave it.
one
Roll the
take
tape.
pros.
Roll the tape. I we
Our
did
whole show is the blooper reel.
family pictures the other day, and the little grandbabies were just they weren't having it. They were just crying. I'm like, take the
Yeah.
picture.
Right.
And it's really close to Aubrey has an iconic picture when she was one-ish. My mother had bought her an outfit, and she was a big baby. You might remember, Matt.
I do.
So
She had huge feet.
whatever size that she wore, uh, it didn't fit. So we had to hurry up and get pictures done in Grandma's outfit before she outgrew it. And we had like one day to get it done. And my little glitter girl, who always loved taking pictures, this day didn't want to. And I'm standing back there with the photographer. It's like back in the days when you go to the mall and take pictures. Remember those days? And Aubrey starts crying, and I'm like, take the picture. And everyone's looking at me like, take the picture. And there's like an iconic picture of her, like big alligator tears falling down her face, and now it's a family joke, and now her kids are very much like that. I'm like, take the picture. And Aubrey's like, Daddy, here we go again. Take it, take it. We're gonna get the candid shots.
Right.
Yeah. So
Yeah. So
Hmm.
we're on the eve of Mother's Day,
mm.
and a game that will possibly become to known as one of the worst officiating moments in NBA postseason history. But not going to get into that.
Hmm.
And you know what's terrible is it's your town, right? Like those Thundercats. Like what
Oh no, I'm talking about Wimby being ejected.
you think that Wemby shouldn't have been ejected?
I think the three fouls that happened to him before he threw that elbow should have been called. He was hit in the face getting the rebound. And in the picture, in the still of him throwing the elbow, the other defender has a hold of his arm with two hands. So when a guy is being fouled that heavily and he lashes out by throwing elbows trying to clear the space out, it's completely understandable.
You think he threw the elbow to clear the space out?
Absolutely.
You think that was his intention?
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
I think he threw the elbow to smack that dude
Nah. Nah.
while clearing
And
the
the
space out.
and the rules are terrible and they're gonna have to be rewritten. Because the
I,
rule says if you throw an elbow at the shoulder or above, it's automatically a foul. Wimby can't move his elbows.
Wemby is 8'3".
Because like anywhere he puts an elbow is at somebody above somebody's shoulder.
His elbow is at the height of a 6'10" power forward center, and
Yes.
his
Yeah.
and they smacked it. My favorite part of the
Brian, he's
entire
seven
sequence
foot four and a half, 7'5".
I understand that
Yeah.
he's tall.
Yeah.
Yeah.
and is Dylan Harper's reaction. That's my favorite part. He's like, "We're about to lose Wemby for this game."
Yeah. Everybody knew but Wimby that he was gone the minute he made contact.
It's like, oh shit. Now, getting suspended is probably where
Oh, he won't get suspended. They've already said he's cleared for Friday's game
he should be. Because
or
his name's not
Tuesday, Wednesday.
Draymond Green.
Right. Yeah, it's his first of the postseason. So like but I think much like what happened before the Laker game, I think this is going to demand a lot more attention from the officials because it's ridiculous. And I think Shaq gets it, but
Oh yeah,
Wimby has permanent scars on his arms from being scratched constantly. That's not part of basketball, man.
no.
And it's not supposed to be.
Well,
But
don't be a freak, and that doesn't happen to you. Don't be a demigod.
right, don't be a Nephilim and play basketball. Like
Right.
keep your Nephilim ass somewhere else. I don't know, but not here. Stop trying to be a man of great renown on the basketball court. With your Gibberum ass.
Oh boy.
By the way, I
Brian,
learned that Gibberum is actually pronounced Gibberim and it's plural. For
You didn't know that?
Ryan, nobody would know that. That's not normal things to know.
We would know that because we've talked about Gibborim on the show.
We don't
And
know it's plural. We just knew the word meant like great dudes.
I knew it was plural, and
Okay.
I usually used Gibbor when I spoke of it in the singular, like Nimrod was a Gibbor.
mm,
Yeah.
But
that's why nobody
Yeah.
likes you, Brian.
that's the reason.
I mean, it's a start.
I mean, that's not the worst thing that people could hold against me, I guess. I'll take it. This is great news for me. I thought it was other stuff.
I thought it was other things. I don't know what it is.
That's great. I have way less work to do on myself. So yeah. So yeah. Speaking of Gibborim and demigods and stuff, what's our show? What are we doing? What's our
Oh, should we do lightning round?
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's do a lightning round, whatever.
Unless you guys want to talk about more sports ball or shooty hoops or whatever you're doing.
Lightning round.
Is Jesus Christ just another version of Osiris?
No.
No.
Are similarities of Dionysus evidence of copying or coincidence?
I wouldn't even say either.
Does Mithras actually have a resurrection story?
He doesn't even have a story.
Wow. Is the virgin birth unique or just another ancient divine conception claim?
It is unique, contrary to popular misconception and George Lucas.
I was about to say George Lucas would like to have a word.
I got a lot to say about George Lucas this show.
What? Hey, nerds.
Spoiler alert.
Stay here.
Right?
Are we comparing surface level themes or actual narrative details?
I think it's surface level.
At best, surface level.
If multiple religions are if here I go, not being able to talk again. If multiple religions share dying and rising gods, does this weaken Christianity?
I would say no.
I would say yes if they actually did. If the other religions' gods actually died and rose again,
Is Jesus' story myth told as history or history told with mythic language?
I don't think
I
it's
I
either.
yeah, I don't accept either of those
I
options.
choose cake.
Cake or death? Do the Gospels read more like biography or theology?
Biography.
Um, I would say both, but
I would say both too. Would first century Jews invent a story that sounds like pagan myth?
um, n
I
no.
think
I mean, I think that the easy answer is no, but anyway.
I
So go
think
ahead,
maybe
Matt.
they might,
Are the differences between Jesus and pagan gods bigger than the similarities?
yes.
Yeah.
Did early Christians borrow ideas or confront them directly?
Um, I wouldn't say that there were no ideas borrowed, but not to the extent that is claimed.
I think it's a longer answer, but I don't think they borrowed them at all. I'll explain.
Is is convergence of religious ideas more likely than direct copying?
This ties to what my answer. So I'll explain in long form
Yeah.
If if
I don't know.
if pagan myths came first, why are the details so different?
because
Um,
myths are fake and other stories are real.
Does the existence of parallels, does the existence of parallels point to imitation or a deeper shared human search for meaning?
insofar as there are parallels, I would say the second one.
And that concludes our lightning round. So, if you haven't noticed, we have a theme now. Um, was the gospel stories copied from the myths of old ancient times, from Egypt to Greece to Persia and all the places? Brian, where does this concept even come from? Why do people think that this is a thing, that the Jesus story is just one more myth, but this time copied off old smart people?
Um, well, the there's a lot of motivation to establish something like that in post-Enlightenment thought. In particular, there was a Scottish scholar named James George Fraser, wrote a book called The Golden Bough. It published in 1890. Essentially, he argued that there's nothing unique about Christianity. It was really just a recapitulation of existing pagan myths about dying and rising savior figures, and there were pagan Christs previous to Jesus, and that the gospel writers basically just adapted these themes and motifs and applied them to Jesus. It was very well received at the time, and the ideas were widely disseminated. And this was particularly attractive to certain scholars in at the Tübingen School in Germany. Um,
Did you say the tube engine?
the Tübingen School, Tubingen, and there's those two dots that go above
An umlaut?
those. Yeah,
His
that's
his
in
name
there
was my
somewhere.
name too.
What?
Whenever we go
I don't
out there,
want to go
people
into a
often
rabbit hole,
shout.
but what is the tube engine school?
It's a university in Germany,
Oh, okay.
but they a lot of what we would call
I'm gonna
liberal Christian scholarship came out of that. Um, that's still kind of with us today.
okay.
Um, there was a bit of embarrassment among a lot of European academics and New Testament scholars uh, over the Jewish roots of Christianity because of the anti-Semitism that pervaded Europe at the time. So they wanted an alternative interpretive background for Christianity besides Judaism, and so Fraser's ideas provided that. Um, so that kind of became the accepted idea in academic, excuse me,
I'm rubbing off on
tongue-tied
you.
today too. Yeah,
Rubbing off on
I caught whatever you got.
That
So that was,
hantavirus.
yeah,
you.
the so that was a widely accepted idea in academia. Um, Carl Jung ran with that in developing his analytical method. The idea that there are these universal patterns in religions, and Christianity is just the most popular iteration of that. Therefore there must be these universal symbols that mean the same thing across human experience. So you can apply this to dreams, to um, and to it kind of means the same thing across all cultures.
And for
Joseph
those
Campbell,
for our listeners, just to make sure everybody's on the same page, that's Carl Jung with a J.
yeah, Carl Jung, if you only read it.
Yeah.
Um, and this is kind of like where Jordan Peterson gets a lot of his ideas about the Bible. He's got all those these scriptural study materials on YouTube and on the Daily Wire. He sits around with Bible scholars and unpackages the Gospels, but he's applying specifically Carl Jung's analytical method, predicated on the ideas of James George Frazer. Then, of course, Joseph Campbell, in the mid 20th century, wrote The Hero with a Thousand Faces, where he applied Carl Jung's analytical method to world religions to kind of distill them down to their essence. He came up with what's known as the monomyth formula, or the hero's journey. Um, a lot of recent, uh, by recent I mean 80s and 90s publications of The Hero with a Thousand Faces have Luke Skywalker on the cover as the ultimate example of this. That's because George Lucas very deliberately drew the story of Star Wars and Indiana Jones, from this monomyth formula. There's an interview. I tried to find it and couldn't find it for this, but the gist of it was George Lucas was asked about Anakin Skywalker being conceived by the Force and his virgin birth, and asked if this was he was making him a Christ allegory because he's also the chosen one. And Lucas's answer was that, well, no, virgin births are those are a dime a dozen in world religion, and messianic figures and chosen ones. Those are all over the place. Those aren't just a Christian thing. The thing is, um, James George Fraser's ideas have been thoroughly discredited by modern scholars. And Joseph Campbell's for the same reason. They haven't really tackled Carl Jung's ideas because it's psychology rather than comparative religion or anthropology, but it it it's it's kind of on the same shaky footing though. So you have Star Wars is George Lucas has very clearly articulated that it is a work of comparative religion. It's not just that, but it is at least that, and he credits its success to using these universal themes. But the critics have of both Campbell and Fraser is that they overstate the similarities between these other religions and Christianity, and gloss over the differences. Like basically they started out looking for this paradigm to validate, and they found their biases confirmed. But when you look at the source material, and you look at the primary sources for Mithras, and I don't think Mithras was in the Golden Bow, but that's a common the thing that's claimed that Jesus was just a copy of Mithras. But when you look at the primary sources, you don't have all of these common elements. You do have dying and rising gods in a sense, but they're always it's about the death and return of the agricultural cycle. Dionysus is the god of wine. Your grape harvest, you harvest the grapes, and then your grapes are gone until you replant, and they grow in the replant in the spring, and they regrow in the summer, and then they die in the winter. And it's basically just about agricultural cycles. It's not about humans seeking personal immortality. It's not about those gods returning to, and there are all kinds of different examples of this that we can unpackage, but bottom line is the sources don't really support the level of commonality that is claimed, and there are so many differences that it kind of blows the whole thing. So that's I personally find it amusing because it's almost like God played a joke on George Lucas the and other storytellers who are they're clearly drawing from the Christian story, but treating it as something generic and universal because they're rejecting that Christianity is anything special or unique or revealed. They're assuming it's just the product of human psychology and going from there. But so yeah,
So
that
in the
concludes my monologue.
yeah, so in the questions, Dre, we kind of dove into a little bit of all of these topics, right? Which ones did we? I mean, because I think we kind of just said yeah, no to a couple of them. I don't know that some of them I think we just kind of answered at face value, and Brian probably covered it. But did we have a couple that made sense to dig back into?
No, I think the ones that you had talked about, you wanted to expand on, but you didn't have a quick answer on. Do you remember which ones those were?
Yeah, it was. I think one was if multiple religions share dying and rising gods, does this weaken Christianity? And then, or did they borrow ideas or confront them directly? I think those were the two that I wanted to dig in on. So I've got a really different take, or maybe you guys are like, yeah, of course, Matt, that's what we've all been saying. But as I was thinking about this and specifically leading into tonight and then with your questions, um, it reminds me of the Exodus story. And if you think about when, we're talking about Christ specifically, right? Using him as like the center point and then comparing, contrasting to the other myths, there are some similarities in mythologies across time, right? I mean, even, other mythologies slash religions have, flood narratives. Um, there are stories of, death and resurrection and beating death and those kinds of things. Um, I think when you go back to Exodus and you're thinking about the story of the plagues that God sent on Egypt, you know, a lot of times those stories get told at a surface level or they're read at the surface level, and people don't really understand what was happening in the story. In that God was purposefully, essentially toying with the Egyptians by over exaggerating the claims of their gods. The way that the different plagues happen, the fire inside of the ice, like those were all unique Egyptian god powers that God was just using as like for sport rather than having to reach deep for these different plagues. And when you unbundle all of that, it's really clear that God was saying, not only are your gods a joke, I can do what they pretend to do by an order of magnitude, and I can do it all at once. Um, and that was kind of the hidden story. Like all we remember is plagues, lots of frogs and locusts, water turned to blood, Passover. Like that's kind of what people remember when you talk about the Exodus story. But there, to me, there was a lot more to it, a lot more DCW, right? Like a lot more divine council, multiple lowercase g gods at play, kind of story going on. Well, then you jump to the birth of Christ, and from a divine council DCW worldview, I said DCW worldview, sorry. Well, I go to the ATM machine. Um, from a divine
I hate when I
council,
put a bunch of my PIN number.
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, when you look at this from a divine council view, which we all agree Christ's birth was part of, essentially the culmination of it, right? If not the, well, I guess not the culmination, it was setting up the culmination, which was the resurrection. But all of that activity had to do a couple of things at once. It had to fulfill prophecy, right? Because that's part of what has to happen. But I think there was also a desire to ensure that it stepped all over all of the other myth stories that existed before that time. And I think that was happening purposely for God to say, not only can I do what I told you I was going to do, but I'm doing what they pretended to have done all along the way. And it was the ultimate stunt. Not stunt in the sense of it was fake. It was he was, showing off. It was a way to flex
It was a
and
flex,
say,
right?
yeah, I can do all of these things that the Egyptians pretend happened. I can do these things that the Mithrians pretend happened. I can do the things that the Greek pantheon pretends to do. Oh, by the way, because they're all watchers. They're all fallen watchers and they all worked for me. And I am, Lord over them also. That's, at a high level what I think was going on. And I think the fact that there is overlap, I think doesn't even come close to discrediting. I think it is the proof point.
Yeah, C.S. Lewis described those as good dreams that God sent, that God planted in pagan stories. Um, but I would also say that he was, and that was kind of the common Christian response to these ideas, that it didn't necessarily disprove Christianity. It just showed that Christianity, C.S. Lewis called it the myth made fact. But at the same time, I think that he was speaking within a time before academia had really like tackled these, had really critically examined and discredited these ideas. Like there's again, the similarities are wildly overstated, and we can, if we look at like specific examples, I think we can from the primary sources, I think we can demonstrate that. But
No, I
um,
agree that they're overstated. But that's all more to the point. Like I think if they were super close, then we would have genuine competing religions, like in the sense of valid, not just competing like from a storybook point of view, right? I agree that it's not that there was a high bar to meet. It was a laughably low bar. And that's why God just kind of, hop skipped over the top of the bar and said, this is silly, right? Silly rabbit tricks are for kids. And, went on to do his things.
so what
What would you say to someone who everything you just said, Matt,
Mhm.
from Exodus to the New Testament? Um, what would you say to someone who just said, "Well, no," because basically they were writing later and they just came up with a better story, and it was a polemic. It was like, "Hey, your beliefs in your gods are wrong, ours is right, and I'm gonna basically flex all over your thing by creating this Exodus myth that kind of as ancient Egypt is coming out of power when this stuff is coming around. It's easy to say this is the new religion now. We're Jews, we're God's people. This Egypt stuff is dumb. Or they're writing directly at the ancient Greek myths by
Yeah.
saying our God is better,
I,
right? So what do you say to that guy who just says, well, yeah, you're just coming up with better myths because you're using that. Like, if I read a story and I wanted to combat a story, I would just write a better story, or I'd write my dad can beat up your dad.
Sure.
What's to stop this
Yeah.
from saying that my dad beats up your dad?
So
I think oh, he asked me.
yeah, I just want to clarify what you're asking though. Like you're saying on the like the
Because
position that
it
you're
seems it seems to me that Exodus is a polemic against all the Egyptians god stuff, right?
like Matt is saying this was how God revealed himself in this historical event, and it was by humiliating the gods of Egypt. You're saying, or at least the position that you're giving voice to,
Sure.
is, well, no, these are just man-made stories. These are just people making religions up and copying each other.
Well,
And that
I don't know if it's that. It's just saying that. I mean, that it is a story to combat a story, and maybe it's competing gods, maybe it's not. Maybe it's made up. Maybe the Egyptian stuff's not made up either, which we just kind of established with the whole Watcher stuff, right?
Yeah.
So, um, basically, it looks to me my dad can beat up your dad, and which myth is stronger?
So my
And the fact that the biblical narrative is the last word, and that's kind of what took off, and it was the most popular as from that point to now. What's to say that that's not what happened?
Yeah. So I would answer it a couple of ways. One, my dad can beat up your dad. Um, first of all, but more to the point, the biggest difference is that in my story, it was written secondhand from firsthand accounts, right? So we have oral tradition that led from the people that no shit seen it to pass that down orally to it being put pen on paper. Um, all of the other stories have no firsthand experience of what actually happened. They were stories that no one knows where they started. So that would be my first point of conversation. And then after that, the conversation literally turns into a, well, how do you trust anything? If we're going to go from the position that, the Old Testament is a polemic, okay, then nothing's real. Like it turns into some kind of never-ending loop of what's the trilemma where you can't prove anything. Brian, what's that one called?
um I
Agrippa. Agrippa's
yeah,
trilemma. Like at some point you bounce into that where you say, "We'll prove that this really happened. We'll prove that really happened. We'll prove Julius Caesar really existed. Prove that we landed on the moon." Like essentially, if you as an individual didn't see it, it can't be proven, and we're left to rely on written accounts and testimony and history, right? So that's kind of like the second into the third point. And then to answer the last part of what you said or you asked is this was the last story. Yeah. And it's held up for 2,500 years. I guess 4,000 if you're considering Exodus all the way through to the birth of Christ. So for 4,000 years, people have had a chance to write a better version of their daddy beating up our daddy, and it hasn't happened.
No, instead they chose to just say your daddy doesn't exist.
Right. They just stuck their head in the sand and said, I just choose to believe in none of this.
so to your first point, Matt, if I understand you correctly, I think you're saying that,
My first point was my daddy can beat up your daddy.
okay, then to your second point,
Okay.
I think you're saying the Exodus story is being presented as a historical event
Correct.
that happened within time and space and human
Correct.
experience. The others are they're 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 once upon a time. They're
Right.
they're they're not they're not historical,
Right.
and that kind of
There was never a Greek writer or a Roman writer that said, or an Egyptian writer, because they didn't write as clearly, that said, I was there and I saw this, and this I'm passing on my story. It was always just this is how it used to be. There's no even the closest thing we have is like the Iliad, where they talk about the gods being there at the Battle of Troy, but no one actually even knows that the Battle of Troy was real, right? Like so, there's no historical rooting to to primitive mythology.
Well, I think that that is probably where modern stuff goes, where we have actual things rooted in history, and I think also that the word myth has kind of a false narrative around it. I think when we say the word myth, we think of a story just made up,
Hmm.
right? But back then, that's not what that was. It was like a mode to convey a thought or
Sure. Well,
discourse,
I
right?
don't think they
That
used the
it that
word
it
myth back then, did they? Like, it's myth is a modern terminology to
Right,
describe that.
for a mode of communication. So
Sure.
they practiced it in a different way. So like just our own modern sensibilities of what the word myth means and what it meant to them. Like they didn't literally believe that these things happened. It was a way to convey esoteric and mystery teachings and thoughts.
I don't know.
So
So, well,
I don't know if that's true with the Roman and the Greek gods. I mean, they
well, but
could
it
very clearly.
but hold
it is.
on.
And
When
I think now when I say
well, Dre, when
that,
you say they, do you mean like all ancient people, or are you only talking about pagans?
I'm talking about pagans and ancient people. Now, yes, there were rubes out there in the middle of nowhere that thought these things, but there were also great philosophers that believed in these myths as well. There was Plato, right? There's people that measured the damn planets with none of the technology that we have today, and then they
Mhm.
come up with it within feet of what we measure today. So to say that these people were just superstitious morons out there in the backwoods is not accurate when all of science, which didn't even get paralleled again until like the middle age, past the Middle Ages, like the Renaissance. So I think that we have a weird misconception of what these people believe that their religion was.
I'm not sure the claim you're trying to make or the position you're trying to make.
The claim is the difference between the gods
Hmm.
and these myths and Jews slash Christians is the literalness of it.
No, that I agree with. Yeah.
Well, I think it's even more fundamental than that. I think the way that they viewed time was different. Um, like, and I think I've talked about this before, but I'm sure our listeners haven't memorized my every teaching. But typically in pagan religion, I shouldn't even qualify it as typical. It's pretty much universal. They saw time as being cyclical. They looked at the cycles of the seasons and the years, and they scaled that up to the cosmos and believed that time itself was a basically a wheel. And these things like so they're like when the Babylonians are worshiping Marduk for the New Year's festival, and they're telling the story of how the storm god Marduk slayed the dragon Tiamat and fashioned the cut her carcass in two and fashioned the heavens from one half and the earth from the other. If you ask them, well, when did this happen? They would have looked at you like you had two heads. Well, it just happened right now. We just reenacted it. Um, like it wasn't, they didn't see time as having a definite beginning. They saw it as ongoing, and they had to perform these rituals in order to maintain the cosmic order. And you have the same thing with the Aztecs sacrificing to keep the sun on. And this is kind of and the Orpheus going down to the underworld to save Persephone. This didn't happen at a particular point in the past. It's a constant that is always happening every time they reenact the story. In the biblical worldview is fundamentally different in that they see time as linear. It had a definite beginning when God said, "Let there be," and there was. The book of Genesis doesn't say creation ex nihilo, literal in so many words, but that became the standard interpretation by the Second Temple period. Because they understood time as linear, had a beginning, and their stories are not about this. these universal archetypes of timeless cycles. It's their stories are about this time in the at a definite point in history when God breaks into human history and breaks into time, and he's actually with them in the temple, and the Gospels are the ultimate telling of that when God broke into history in the person of Jesus and rose from the dead. And so when you look at this pattern of dying and rising gods within that context, it's not it's not eschatological. It's not, here's the story about how Dionysus beat death on behalf of all of us. It's no, this is the story about how the 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 anthropomorphized personification of wine and drink and merriment, how he dies in the winter and comes back in the spring when we replant the grape harvest. And it, so all of these stories have to be understood in that context, how it's, as Matt was saying, they're not telling you a history of something that actually happened within human experience. They're telling you these universal truths that explain the way things are. So,
Right. So they don't actually think that Marduk slayed Tiamat. Like that's
no,
it's just
I think they did.
I don't think they did. And I think that there was other groups that didn't do sacrifices. There was groups that were pretty prolific that were vegetarians that did the same thing. They believed in baptism by wind, and they compare that to John and the Holy Spirit. So I think there was
Well,
water baptism, and then there was wind baptism, and there was rebirth, and all of these things. I don't. I think again, I think there was rubes that think that
well,
that might have really happened, but the people that were in charge didn't believe that
but why do you think they didn't believe in Marduk and Tiamat?
because they weren't literalists.
I- Yeah, but I think even using that term, you're kind of applying modern categories to ancient people. Like when you read the Bible, and the Israelites keep falling into Baal worship. Baal was basically the local version of Marduk.
Right, right.
Like if it wasn't raining, that meant like the ancient Near Eastern thinking was that when it rained, that was Baal or Marduk. Um, Forgive me for being crass, but this is the belief that was the storm god having sex with the earth goddess, um, Asherah or Ishtar in Canaan, and Nana in Babylon. So if it wasn't raining, well, that like they literally believed that um, Baal and Ishtar just weren't in the mood, and we need to get them in the mood, and that's why their whole system revolved around ritual sex, which was basically live porn for the gods. Um, they really believed this would cause it to rain, and that's why they did it.
Dre, Dre, have you read something that brings you to this
I
belief, or
have,
do
and
you?
I don't have
Oh
anything
no, I wasn't asking you for
specific
a
about it.
quote. I'm
Yeah.
just curious if this is just something you've come up with from interpreting
No, no,
things, or if
these are things that,
this is a belief that you've come across.
it's an esoteric thing.
Okay.
These people that believe in the mystery religions and in inner gods and everything that's kind of cosmological from the inside. We all become Christ, that type of thing.
No,
Yeah, but
I
that kind of thing came a lot later, though.
Uh, it, it it was it came a lot later due to the Christianity of it, or the pseudo Christianity of it. But I there's evidence that it did not come later. It's always been there, and a lot of it was Egyptian.
Are you talking about the Emerald Tablet of Hermes Trismegistus?
Well, there's that and other raw and
Yeah, but like the Emerald Tablet I mean, that's pretty well established to have come about in the Middle Ages. Like that's not actually ancient Egyptian occultism.
Oh,
That's
okay.
um, a lot of the idea about, the Christ in you and your inner God. That's kind of that that's essentially a a Christianized occultic version of Hinduism, which is you did have some of that coming over into Gnosticism, but it wasn't something that predated Christianity. If I'm wrong, I would be interested in knowing what group
Yeah,
you're
I mean,
talking about.
and I don't have it, but I would. It's something we can talk about another time for sure.
Um,
I mean, I'll take your word for that for now for lack of a reference.
so um,
And
so
for the
some
record, it's not
exam
something I believe in. I'm saying that these are arguments. These are arguments that people have against the literalness of Christ, and people say that John the Baptist didn't exist, and neither did Jesus, and neither did the disciples, and all these things, right? So
Yeah, but I think to go that far, I mean, we talked about all of this in our last episode or two episodes back, right? Like that's a that's pretty thin footing to be on to say like none of this existed. I mean, you know, going further back into the Old Testament, did King David exist? Like I don't know that there's any strong historical proof of that, right? But that's a little bit further back in history. And when you're dealing with, pre-writing essentially, not really, but you know what I mean? Like things get a little
it
tougher.
was certainly pre-historiography as we know
Right.
it. Like
Yeah,
any like pre
that's probably a better way to
like
put it.
anything
but
pre-Herodotus, they're not writing with necessarily the same criterion
Right.
for historiography that
sure,
that we would prefer.
but
But
we can have historical figures that didn't do the things that they say they did.
Sure. But did
Right. I
those
mean,
historical
Martin Luther
figures even
King alone,
exist?
right? Like he was only 50 years ago, right?
Uh-oh.
So, right. So, I mean, Abraham Lincoln, we
Are
go
you
back then,
saying
right?
Martin Luther King didn't do all the great things that are attributed to him?
I'm just saying he didn't write a speech.
and he also
So
did a few bad things that
he
he
did some
doesn't he
bad things that
doesn't
we
quite get
want to.
credit for. But
So, right,
I'm just, or that's what I've heard. I'm not
right.
I'm not making that argument.
We don't
Um,
know.
I don't espouse these thoughts either.
I disavow
I
what I just said.
I do, but
Well,
you,
you can do that. You can get away with that, Dre.
definitely
You get
that
away
makes
with
me
it
an
worse than us.
absolute
Really?
heretic.
Yeah.
This that's it's
Well,
I'm being proverbially burned at the stake right now.
He's
So,
already light-skinned.
right, it's over.
I would
But
try to help out, but I think I
but
just make it
that's my
worse.
point. So just because Peter existed doesn't mean that Peter did the things
Sure.
that
Sure.
right.
I mean, that's fair, right? I mean, but again, to my point, and like you said, Martin Luther King, I mean, did Trump say the things that people say he said? You
Thank
know what
you.
I mean? Like,
Well,
And that's in the last 10 years, right? So
yeah. In the age of everything being recorded and on the internet and forever retention.
but then
And
again, but then it goes back to what you said. Well, then nothing, believe nothing then,
right.
right?
And
Like
that's why
well,
at some level
and where does that leave you?
Agrippa's trilemma becomes very real in this conversation. And for anybody that doesn't know, look it up. I'm not incredibly schooled on it. I just learned about it not too long ago. But Agrippa was a philosopher, and basically he backs into if you ask the same questions over and over again, you run out of places to prove things. And to him, that was a gotcha. But essentially, all of the serious world of philosophy doesn't support it because it basically says that nothing's real, and we know for a fact that things are real. So,
Do
I
we?
know for a
Do
fact
we?
this is Coke Zero that I'm drinking. Now, everybody looking on the internet, how do you know this isn't AI? You don't, but it tastes delicious to me, and that's all that
yeah.
matters.
And I think that's an important question to bring up is for whatever claim, what is your starting premise?
Right.
And for the whole like dying for James George Frazer and his admirers, their starting claim was that, well, we know God doesn't exist. So we know that there are no miracles. There's no prophecy or prophets. There's no miracles or messiahs. There's no revelation. So what do we make of the existence of Christianity? Well, they must have been getting these ideas from somewhere else. Where could that be? Oh, well, Dionysus. He died and came back. Except he came back as an agricultural cycle. That was the point. Um, none of the and there are a number of these examples that we could go through where when like there's the claim that's been going around about Mithras having um have you guys seen that movie Zeitgeist that came out in 2007?
I've watched it loose, uh, a cursory watch a long time ago, probably in 2009 or 10, but I don't remember much about it.
Yeah, it's not exactly the argument. It's essentially the argument Fraser made, except he didn't. Fraser, I don't think appealed to Mithras, but he appealed to others. But the claim for Mithras was that he was born on December 25th. He had 12 disciples. He was crucified and rose again. He was born of a virgin. Um, all the usual Christmas story stuff applied to Mithras, and and this goes around the internet, and it's stated as settled fact. And I think Bill Maher included it in his religulous or however you say it. But skeptics will cite this stuff as if it's settled fact, and you're just a dumb ignorant Christian because you don't know about this. But I've watched Zeitgeist and listened to Bill Maher, so I know more than you, and I'm gonna I get to lampoon you because you're ignorant and I'm enlightened. Thing
But what
is,
about the similarity with the shepherds though and the magi that came to visit Jesus and the witnesses of the birth?
the thing is, we don't have any writings about like if you ask for the what primary sources are you basing that on so that we know all these things about Mithras, they won't be able to tell you because we have no written sources. It was a mystery religion. It was centered around this. You were initiated by
Right.
sacrifice. You were positioned underneath a bull, and you would sacrifice it and bathe in its blood. And this is attributed to Mithras, who. But and what everything we know about Mithras, we get from uh, illustrations on pottery, and he's consistently shown springing fully grown from a rock. Um, so that's what they're calling a virgin birth. Um, there's no record of him being crucified. It's basically he sprang alive from a rock and he killed a sacred bull. And this was these are maybe there's a couple more things I'm forgetting, but all of the details that are claimed about him, they're just not there. There's just no, they made this up out of whole cloth. When you look at the primary and also the Mithra mystery cult, it came after Christianity anyway. So it's now there was a Persian god named Mithras who represents the sun, but he's not the same as the Mithras worshipped in the Roman mystery religion. So that's just something they've made up. And you kind of get the similar thing when you go and look at all of the other pagan gods, like Osiris. That was one of Fraser's claims that Jesus is just like a remade Osiris. Um, but again, when you read the primary source, Osiris was dismembered by his evil brother Seth, the serpent, the Egyptian snake god, and the embodiment of evil. His wife Isis reassembled his pieces. Couldn't find his penis, so she just made one out of gold for him, and then having having
Lorena
revived,
Bobbitt had to like mold one out of gold.
yeah, having revived him, she they they had sex, and hence was Horus born. But after, so basically Osiris was replaced as the king of the gods among the living by his son Horus, who represents the sun. And then Osiris went to become the lord of the underworld, to rule over the afterlife. So it's not really a resurrection from the dead in that he was restored to life on earth. His resurrection was being consigned to the underworld. It's basically explaining how he became king of the dead.
Right.
Um, Now, I will agree that there's, and then we went through the Dionysus thing, and there's others that we could examine, but I I will agree that there is commonality to Christians' conception of Jesus, but this is after the Platonic influences where Jesus became basically the ruler of the afterlife. About Christians are like that the underworld was kind of transplanted to the above world in heaven, and Jesus was kind of given that role as Osiris, um, as Christianity kind of drifted from its Jewish roots and adopted all of these these Platonic metaphysics. Christianity did come to somewhat resemble these pagan religions, but none of that resemblance comes from the Bible. It's only a later projection where the predominantly Gentile church kind of shoehorned Jesus into that mold. But that might be a different show. So, but
I think that is a different show because you've mentioned that a couple of times in the last few episodes, and I think it's something we need to explore, but we need to give it more space.
I
Jamie,
um
make a note of that for me.
forgot we hired that guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's pretty good. I don't know. We should use him.
Um, but the bottom line, I mean, the reason all of this persists, despite the fact that it's been thoroughly discredited by academia, people still bring that underlying presupposition that, well, the Jesus of the Gospels can't have been real. So how do we account
Right.
for this?
Right.
Um, and this stuff, it validates the prejudices people bring with them. Um, But if you don't presuppose that, if you're at least open to the idea that God might exist, and if he exists, he can reveal himself, and this is the show we already did, but it might be worth linking that in the description, where we made the argument for the resurrection. If you approach the question of the resurrection from a philosophically neutral standpoint, if you don't bring if you don't bring philosophical commitments with you that preclude the existence of God, preclude um, that God can intervene in history, then the evidence lends itself to the resurrection happening. If the resurrection happened and Jesus is the Messiah, and he thought that the Old Testament was history, um, then that validates it. Like going back to the King David thing. Um, and Agrippa's trilemma. Most Old Testament scholars are what's known as minimalists. They presuppose that the Bible is mythology, i.e., fiction, unless proven otherwise. So until they find the mummified corpse of King David, then King David doesn't exist. Stuff like that. Because we don't find artifacts in the Sinai wilderness of the Exodus. Therefore, the Exodus didn't happen. But the amount of evidence for the historicity of the Old Testament, it just keeps kind of trickling out. Like there's been a stele discovered referencing the House of David that dates to pretty close to David's lifetime. Not exactly there, but it's close enough that we know, well, the dynasty of David was historical. um, stuff like that. Like the reasons to maintain the minimalist position are they're shrinking, but the problem is a lot of these discoveries, they're kind of individually small. They don't make huge headlines. They don't make a huge splash, but if you look at them cumulatively, they they make a pretty strong case for the historicity of the Old Testament, but it's not enough, trickling out one at a time to overturn that general minimalist attitude. So,
Yeah. I think come back around and kind of put a fine point on this from my perspective is Dre, going back to your devil's advocate questions about, somebody says this is the same as that and it's all stupid and it's all fake, whatever. I'd say at the end of the day, the number one difference, I said it, but I didn't really land it, is all of the other religious stories, mythologies, whatever you want to call it, are all coming from a position of here's a cool story to explain something, or this really happened, but it happened in the abstract, or like Brian mentioned, this happened in a weird space-time continuum and it continues to happen, but we can't see it and prove it. And the biggest difference is every single story in Christianity and in the Old Testament, as it relates to Christianity, happened out in the open in front of people, and there were people that retold the story. And to me, that lands as the primary difference. Christ didn't just resurrect; he resurrected, and then he went to Jerusalem and showed himself. Right, like he wasn't secreted away and then had like a little conclave and then vanished. He showed up to everybody and said, look, right? And then people talked about it. And that is the easiest explanation for why the religion ballooned after his resurrection versus getting really big right up until the point that he died, and then they all just kind of disappeared and told bedtime stories to their families for the rest of their lives. And going back to the Old Testament, um, Jewish culture post Exodus was really heavily based around telling the Passover story. The Passover Seder and Passover was a really big freaking deal because it was this really big supernatural event that predicated their being released from slavery and being free people. And so they continued to tell that story to pass it on so that the story didn't die because it was important to them that their children and their children's children knew from where they came. And, cultures don't do that if the story isn't viewed as being historically real.
and to add to your point, um, well, the temple was the center of their civic and religious life.
Mhm.
It had at a specific location in Jerusalem. Before that, it was the tabernacle, but this was the place where the presence of God dwelled. Well, why does the presence of God dwell in there? Well, that's where the Ark of the Covenant is. Well, what is that? Well, that's the sacred chest that Moses built at the instructions of God. Well, what's in there? That this is the presence of God. A jar of manna to commemorate their wilderness wanderings. Um, like the jar of the actual manna, and Aaron's rod that had budded to show that God had chosen the Levites in the house of Aaron to be his priests. Could they go and verify that? Well, no. They only the high priest was allowed there, but the concept of it was that this is the presence of God because it houses these artifacts from this event that actually happened. Well, how do we know the event happened? Um, well, why is the temple there? Well, because there's an ark in there
Right.
to house, and like the whole point of their religious life, I mean that or this their entire religious life was centered on this historical claim. Um, And when Jesus said, "I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness." This is in John's Gospel in the context of the Festival of Booths, when they would build, or the Festival of Tabernacles. They would set up tents and camp out for a week to commemorate their ancestors' wilderness wanderings. For Jesus to say that in that context, he's referencing the pillar of fire that was God's constant presence with them, and the pillar of cloud by day. But they could simply look up and see that God was there. Um, to say, "I am the light of the world," he's basically saying, "I am for all of human history what that pillar of fire was to the Israelites." Um, Again, it's our religion is centered on a historical event. Historical events can be investigated and verified or falsified. That it's God presenting himself for us to be able to investigate to find out if he's there. These others are, they're these these timeless archetypes that are they're just there to be accepted as an explanation for the cycles of nature, but they're not there to give you transcendence and immortality. They're there to explain why things are the way they are and to invite you to just accept the cycles of nature and be a part of it. But it's not, the meaning is so different that there's not even any, they're barely even comparable. So Dre,
So
what you
when
think?
so when Christianity was getting launched after 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 these witnesses, um, the pagan religion was still out there. How did our church fathers in the very beginning deal with these contradictions or being claimed to be plagiarists?
Um, are you talking about the Justin Martyr thing?
Well, there's Martyr, there's Martyr, there's Justin, there's Clement, there's it goes on because it was, I mean, Justin Martyr had an interesting take. It was he like openly admitted about the similarities between Jesus and the pagan figure.
You
But
you you cut out there for
what?
Yeah, you cut out. You said he admitted there are similarities between Jesus and the
Pagan figures.
okay.
And but he did something crazy where he flipped the conclusion. He said the similarities exist because demons preemptively imitated the truth. So pagan myths like sons of gods, miracles, births, etc., were counterfeits planted ahead of time when Christ came and people would dismiss him just after another myth. So basically, it's basically the Watchers, demons saying, well, you know what, we know that Jesus is coming one day, so we'll just make all these myths, and then hopefully it'll be convoluted and then no one will actually believe that it's Jesus. So that's interesting take by Justin, who was kind of one of the first church fathers, or super early, hundreds or one.
Justin, great intent, really bad execution.
So First Peter, he said he Peter writes about how the uh, the prophets searched intently with the greatest care to find out the time and circumstances to which the Spirit of Christ in them was pointing when he predicted the sufferings of Christ and the glories that would follow. And it was revealed to them that they were serving not themselves but you. Uh, whom this, I don't remember the exact line after that, but he says, "Into these things even angels long to look," which tells me
Hmm.
that I don't think that the angels or the watchers, I don't think they were privy to these details. Um, so I
Yeah,
don't like I
I
don't
think I think it imparts way too much borderline omniscience on the part of regular angels. So yeah.
yeah, and
Uh,
and also when Justin Martyr wrote that, like it was at a time when Christianity was vulnerable to persecution, and he was trying to convince his pagan critics that Christianity wasn't so different than what they already believed. Like he was trying to make it as non-threatening and familiar to them as possible. Um, so that might have motivated him to maybe overstate the similarities.
I think also
Um,
in fairness, when your name is Martyr, I think you kind of tread lightly.
I mean, it's a crazy name. Uh, I think it's interesting that Clement of Alexandria, he took a little softer approach and a little more philosophical. So when you talk about like it's not that much different, I think Clement might have hit that a little harder. Basically, he said that Greek philosophy and myths contain partial glimpses of truth, and these are like seeds pointing toward Christ. So pagan myths get their source from Christianity. So it's like the opposite.
Yeah,
Um,
that kind
pagan
of
pagan ideas are incomplete. They're just shadows. And when Christ comes, he's the full reality of what it is that you guys believe in.
I
So when
think
you
I
start
like that
talking
better.
about when Brian was talking about, that's a way to explain the cycles of life, uh, Christ comes along. I explain everything. So here I am. You explain the cycle of life. I'm explaining it beyond that because I'm Jesus, by the way. Hi. Tertullian, he is one of the whole thing like, you guys are stupid because it doesn't match. None of none of your shit what you're saying is what we're saying. So shut up, go away. That was Tertullian. He's like, miss not one, they're morally questionable and they're inconsistent. So when we talk about like the virgin birth, I mean, there's no virgin birth stories. Zeus is down there doing some big watcher stuff.
Some Phil Flander and filth.
So right where God did no such thing, right? So uh
Take my big lightning and
and the gospel accounts are ethically serious, they're historically grounded, and this is Tertullian back in 155 to 200. Like, hey, saying the same things that we're kind of saying. He's saying the similarities. His conclusion was the similarities are exaggerated. What you're saying is trash because it's not the same thing. So it's interesting that and then a bunch of guys like Origin, he's like he's like, nah, you guys copied from us.
I think Tertullian sounds like we should start calling him like iced tea.
He said, nah. But
Hmm.
I mean, really, the conclusion, the big difference is Christianity is rooted in history
Yeah,
and not myth.
yeah.
Um,
I
um,
think that's really the exclamation point or the final statement is, you can argue what that means, but you
right,
can't argue that Christianity is based in historical claims, right? Like, fight amongst
right.
yourselves about
But
the
whether the historical claims
specifics,
are true or not,
right? That's a
right?
different conversation.
But they are claims where the stories of these gods and the God man and
Hmm.
the not even salvation, right? Just he died for you, and you're supposed to. I don't even know what you're supposed to do with
You,
Dionysus,
you,
but
well, or the on the Egyptian side, you just get to die
right.
and go be with him dead in Hades or whatever, right? In the
Yay,
underworld.
yeah, and
congrats.
there's a few other examples that are often cited, like Romulus was supposedly. Well, there's examples that you'll run into when you talk about these with atheists. Like there's the claim that Hercules was raised from the dead. Romulus was.
Hercules was raised from the dead.
That's the claim they'll make. But when you and it,
It was in Disney.
um, yeah, which is essentially making him a Christ allegory in the Disney thing. But it was, um, but when you read the primary source, and by the way, like I checked this. I checked this yesterday, and it's not this way anymore. But a while back, I checked the Wikipedia article on resurrection and looked at the examples from other religions. And you have these things, and you check the source, like where they cite the source, and you go down. There's either like a paywall there, or It's uh, or it just doesn't support it at all. But the Hercules thing that you'll still hear very often, it says that his on his funeral pyre, his smoke took him up to Olympus where he became a god.
He got
He
to
Um,
be
made
a
it.
real he got to be a real boy.
Yeah.
right. So
He was such a hero. He finally made it. Zero to hero in
yeah,
no time flat.
yeah, which is basically they're calling apotheosis, which is a thing
Not for
where
Nephilim.
yeah, it's a thing where a demigod dies and he gets accepted among the Olympians
What
in
happened to George
death.
Washington?
What?
What happened to George Washington?
He he
The
went to a
apotheosis of George Washington?
I don't I don't know what you're referring to.
The artwork in the top of the Capitol?
Huh.
You didn't know that's what's in the top of the Capitol?
I didn't know it was called
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Huh. Cool. So is he on Olympus now or
Uh,
is that what's being depicted
hmm
or
No,
all
it's
right.
heaven.
heaven. He's
It's
with
real
God,
apotheosis.
like
Yeah.
the right hand of the Father.
Hmm.
Big
Oh,
A
G Dubs,
apotheosis.
G Dubs.
The original G dubs.
That's just right. OG G Dub.
And there
Yeah.
was this guy that Herodotus wrote about who he was a philosopher who died. He was seen dead, but then his body disappeared from a locked room, and then somebody saw him again later. That comes up to
That's not a
support
very
the art.
hardcore claim, though. That's like
Yeah,
Elvis or Tupac, right?
but
Like
the argument is, well, Christianity isn't that unique. You got resurrections are happening all over the place in the ancient world. Well, I mean that's
all over the place. That's hilarious.
well, you got Romulus who
Oh,
also ascended to was taken up from his funeral pyre when his body burned. And you have Hercules, and then you have this guy that Herodotus wrote about. But it was,
so so they're saying the Jews who were part of the Jesus movement thought, man, how can we make him as cool as Romulus and Hercules? I know. Let's have him die and come back to life.
yeah, it doesn't. It's these aren't very strong arguments,
Yeah.
but
I
Okay.
just double checked. I was wrong. It was Mount Olympus. George Washington's on Mount Olympus.
Hell yeah. Greek god among us. Well,
um,
I just like that the church fathers didn't try to deny the parallels. They just redefined them and just pressed harder. They just doubled down on the historical claim.
Yeah.
Like sure, yeah, yeah, pretty similar. Nice. Except that our guy actually did it. So what? Join us or not? It's your
Right.
salvation. So,
well,
I mean,
sometimes it was, please don't kill us.
well, I mean,
So,
or I mean, go ahead and kill us because I'll be back.
yeah,
And I think that's what the reason why they had such conviction is because they understood that death was not the end. And
yeah, and that's in all those other supposed resurrections, it kind of was. It was just
right, you die and go stay there or you're zombie. I don't know. But
yeah, it's resurrection to like maybe a slightly better place in the afterlife, but
right.
it's not a return to life. So,
So if you have that conviction, you're not afraid to die for you're not afraid to die on that hill, if you will,
so to speak.
so to speak. So we solve it?
Yeah, I think we solved pagan resurrections.
All right.
I think we did it.
Good game.
I was hoping we would. I wasn't sure,
I
but
was I was
They had us in the first half.
dude, I mean, what a comeback. Don't call it a comeback. Been here for years. 2000 years. Last thoughts, fellas?
No.
I'm all out.
All right. With that, I'm going to go ahead and say stay enlightened, stay curious, And we'll solve something else next week. So come here, check us out. God bless.